For the first time in American history, a sitting president walked into the United States Supreme Court, not as a party to argue, not as a witness to testify, but as a spectator watching justices rule on his own executive order. That moment alone rewrites a chapter of American constitutional history. But that is just one of three major developments breaking today that are reshaping the future of this republic and the stability of the world. Welcome to Tomorrow Updates. I'm Julian Thorne. Today we cover the full picture. A landmark constitutional battle over who gets to be American. A war in the Middle East edging toward a crossroads. And a fractured Western alliance that may never look the same again. Let us begin. On Wednesday morning, the United States Supreme Court began hearing oral arguments on whether President Donald Trump's executive order can overturn what has long been the constitutional guarantee of citizenship for anyone born on American soil, regardless of their parents' immigration status. And for the first time in recorded history, the sitting president was in the courtroom to watch. Trump's motorcade arrived at the court just before 10 a.m. Eastern Time, as reflected on his public schedule for the day. According to the Supreme Court Historical Society, no sitting president has ever attended oral arguments until today. Trump attended the hearing but left around 11:30 a.m. after his Solicitor General completed his arguments. The case is formally known as Trump versus Barbara, but in substance, it is a referendum on one of the most foundational legal principles in American democracy. On day one of his second term, Trump signed an executive order stating that babies born in the United States would not be entitled to automatic citizenship if their parents were illegal immigrants or undocumented workers. That order immediately contradicted what has been the legal interpretation of the 14th Amendment for more than 150 years, that the Constitution grants automatic citizenship to babies born in this country, regardless of the parent's status. Several federal district court judges ruled that Trump's order violated the Constitution. Two federal circuit courts of appeal upheld injunctions blocking the order from taking effect. Today's arguments represent the case's ultimate destination, the nation's highest court. Now, what is the actual legal argument the Trump administration is making? The administration argues that an individual naturally born in the United States is only considered a citizen if their parents have allegiance to the nation. They point to the fact that entering the United States illegally is a criminal offense, as evidence that undocumented immigrants do not meet the traditional notion of allegiance. The opposing argument, led by the ACLU, is straightforward. The men who wrote the 14th Amendment deliberately chose to confer citizenship on the child, not based on the parent's conduct. Chief Justice John Roberts questioned the administration's lead attorney, Solicitor General D. John Sauer, pressing him on his claim that the children of illegal immigrants do not deserve citizenship under the Constitution. Roberts noted that the legal exceptions the administration cited, children of foreign ambassadors, children of enemy soldiers, were, in his words, very quirky and far too narrow to justify applying to an entire class of undocumented immigrants. Justice Brett Kavanaugh pressed Sauer on why Congress, in the 1940s and 1950s, repeated the same, subject to the jurisdiction thereof language from the 14th Amendment without attempting to challenge the Supreme Court's 1898 ruling in Wong Kim Ark. A precedent that established birthright citizenship as constitutional doctrine. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson told Sauer that he had a number of significant hurdles in his argument, including explaining why he believed the framers did not adhere to common law at the time the 14th Amendment was ratified. That tells us something critical. Even some of the conservative justices appear skeptical of the government's position. The case could redefine who is considered American in ways not seen for more than 150 years. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the president in the chamber. The court is designed to be an independent check on the White House. Trump himself has acknowledged that his attendance could be distracting, which is why he previously chose not to attend arguments in a different case. Some Democratic lawmakers and even one Trump ally, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, told Politico they thought the visit was a mistake, warning that justices might interpret it as an attempt to apply pressure. And that is the key analytical point here. Whether or not Trump intended it as pressure, the symbolic weight is unmistakable. A president physically watching the court deliberate over his own policies sends a message, even if that message is never spoken aloud. But there is another dimension. Trump's attendance may be less about intimidation and more about legitimization. By showing up personally, he signals to his political base that he is fully committed to this fight. That birthright citizenship is not a peripheral issue, but a centerpiece of his governing vision. The court is expected to issue its decision at the end of its current term in late June or early July. If the court rules in Trump's favor, the implications are generational. Hundreds of thousands of children born in the United States each year to undocumented parents would no longer be automatically citizens. States, hospitals, and federal agencies would face an administrative burden of enormous proportions, attempting to verify the immigration status of parents at the moment of a child's birth. If the court rules against the administration, which the trajectory of today's questioning suggests is more likely, it would represent a significant constitutional rebuke to executive power on immigration. But it would not end the political battle. Trump would likely pursue legislative action or continue to test the constitutional limits of his authority through other means. The case could redefine who is considered American in ways not seen for more than 150 years. That sentence deserves to sit with you, not decades, not since a recent policy shift. 150 years. Here is the broader context that serious viewers need to understand. The birthright citizenship debate is not simply a legal argument. It is a philosophical one about the nature of national belonging. The United States has, since the post-Civil War era, operated on the principle that the soil determines citizenship. This stands in contrast to most of the world, where blood, meaning parentage, determines who belongs. What the Trump administration is attempting to do is shift the United States closer to the global majority on this question. Whether that is constitutionally permissible is what 6 justices on a conservative court are now deciding. The irony is sharp. A court built with a 6-3 conservative supermajority, shaped in large part by Trump's own appointments, is now the institution standing between the president and one of his most ambitious domestic policy goals. That is the American constitutional system functioning exactly as designed, or at least attempting to. But the Supreme Court is not the only arena where history is being made today. Across the ocean, a war that began on February 28th, Operation Epic Fury, is now over a month old. And in the past 24 hours, that conflict has reached what may be its most consequential diplomatic and strategic moment. Iran says it wants the war to end. Trump says he has a condition. And America's oldest allies have drawn a line that Washington is calling a betrayal.
What does it cost to fight a war your allies refuse to join? America is finding out right now. More than 30 days into Operation Epic Fury, the United States and Israeli military campaign against Iran, the battlefield has shifted from the skies over Tehran to the negotiating table, the global energy markets, and the corridors of Brussels. Today, the Trump administration made 3 statements that, taken together, are as consequential as any military development of this war. First, Iran reportedly wants a ceasefire. Second, Washington has one non-negotiable condition. Third, if NATO did not step up for this war, the United States may not step up for the next one. Let us break this down carefully. President Trump announced on Wednesday morning via Truth Social that Iran's president has asked the United States for a ceasefire. He said his administration would consider the request only once the Strait of Hormuz is open, free, and clear. Until then, he wrote, the United States would continue its military operations. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Al Jazeera that Tehran is not looking for a ceasefire. Rather, it is seeking to end the war on its own terms. He noted that there are currently no formal negotiations underway. Iran subsequently described Trump's claim as false and baseless. So what is actually happening here? The month-old war has caused widespread economic turmoil and massive fluctuations in global energy prices. That turbulence is directly linked to Iran's continued ability to effectively block the Strait of Hormuz, the pathway for a major portion of the world's oil shipments. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical Gulf waterway through which about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas supplies transit. It has been effectively shuttered as a result of the war, raising serious concerns about a potential global economic downturn. This is the real strategic chess match. The United States and Israel have, by most military assessments, successfully degraded Iran's conventional military capabilities. But Iran has deployed its most asymmetric and economical weapon of all, geography. By bottling up the Strait of Hormuz, Tehran has turned a military defeat into an economic siege, not of itself alone, but of the entire global economy. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that the strait was fully under its control. And that is Trump's single non-negotiable demand. The strait must reopen before any ceasefire is even discussed. This brings us to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this week. And it may be the most revealing statement made by any American official in this entire conflict. Rubio said that Iran was pursuing intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of striking the United States and would have achieved those objectives if President Trump had not launched Operation Epic Fury. He warned that Tehran was aiming to become the next North Korea, but an Iran run by radical clerics with missiles that could eventually reach the American mainland. That is what Iran would have ultimately achieved, he said, had Trump not acted. This framing is deliberate and strategically significant. By invoking North Korea, Rubio is making a specific argument that an Iran armed with intercontinental missiles and ideologically committed to American destruction would be an existential threat in a way that even a nuclear-armed Iran's predecessors were not. Rubio also described Iran's leadership as people who believe it is their calling to usher in the end of the world. He said, "These people want nuclear weapons." Rubio also signaled progress in back-channel talks, noting that while Tehran remains publicly defiant, Iranian officials are being more cooperative in private discussions. He warned, however, that Trump will not allow fake negotiations to be used as a delay tactic to buy Iran more time. Now, Trump himself stated that his primary goal in this conflict was to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and said he believed that goal has now been attained. He added that, in his assessment, the war could be wrapped up within 2 to 3 weeks. The administration's public posture, then, is this: we have achieved our core military objective. We are nearing the finish line. But we will not stop until the economic chokehold on the world is released. Of all the consequences of this war, the one with the longest historical shelf life may not be any development on the battlefield. It may be what is happening right now within the Western alliance itself. Trump has been angered by European allies' refusal to send warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and by their refusal to let the United States use military bases to launch attacks against Iran. European leaders see any attempt to reopen the strait as highly dangerous, and view Trump's war on Iran as one of choice, one they were not consulted on before it began in late February. Spain said the United States could not use jointly operated military bases in the war. Italy denied United States bombers the use of a military base in Sicily. France refused to allow planes loaded with military supplies to fly over French territory. Poland's defense minister said his country had no plans to relocate its Patriot air defense systems to the Middle East, stating that Poland's security is an absolute priority. The response from Washington has been explosive. In an interview with The Telegraph, Trump described NATO as a paper tiger and said the question of withdrawing from the alliance is, in his words, beyond reconsideration. He added that Russian President Vladimir Putin shares his view of the alliance's weakness. In a separate interview with Reuters, Trump said he is absolutely considering trying to withdraw the United States from NATO and previewed that he would criticize the alliance during his primetime address to the nation on Wednesday night. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, one of the most traditionally pro-NATO voices in Trump's inner circle, told Fox News that after this conflict concludes, the United States will have to re-examine the value of NATO for this country. Rubio added, "The remarks mark the second such warning in less than a week." Now, to be analytically fair, the European position is not simply cowardice or ingratitude. It is, in fact, structurally coherent. European allies see the United States' war against Iran as one of choice, a conflict they were not consulted on beforehand. Trump put European leaders in an impossible political position. His year of berating allies over tariffs, Greenland, and Afghanistan left them with almost no room to both support him and survive their own domestic political pressures. European leaders have stressed that NATO is a defensive alliance and that they will assist in securing the Strait of Hormuz once the hot phase of the war concludes. But Trump's counterargument is one of reciprocity. His position, stated bluntly, is America mobilized for Ukraine, a conflict that was not America's war, and Europe did not return that commitment when America went to war. Trump told The Telegraph, "We've been there automatically, including Ukraine. Ukraine wasn't our problem. It was a test, and we were there for them, and we would always have been there for them. They weren't there for us." Whether you find that argument compelling or not, it is resonating within the American political base. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2024 sought to place a firm legal brake on any attempt to pull the United States out of NATO, prohibiting a president from doing so without either a two-thirds Senate supermajority or an act of Congress. However, legal analysts note that those constraints are far from solid, and Trump could seek to circumvent them by invoking presidential authority over foreign policy. In other words, the threat is legally complicated, but it is not legally impossible. And even short of full withdrawal, Trump has a range of tools: reducing troop deployments, withdrawing from joint exercises, cutting intelligence sharing that would functionally hollow out the alliance without formally ending American membership. Let us step back and look at the long arc. In the short term, over the next 2 to 4 weeks, the most likely scenario is some form of negotiated de-escalation. Trump has already extended the deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to April 6th, describing ongoing talks as going well through intermediaries, including Pakistan. Iran, for its part, has presented its own conditions, including war reparations and guarantees against future attacks. In the medium term, the economic damage from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz will continue to shape global energy markets for months, regardless of when the fighting stops. Even if Trump ends the war, he would struggle to outrun the economic and political reverberations of leaving the strait under effective Iranian influence, and markets are unlikely to be easily convinced by political spin. In the long term, and this is the development that historians will write about, the Iran war has accelerated a transformation in Western security architecture that was already underway. Allied leaders are learning that they can no longer rely on American security guarantees as unconditional, since an American president has made them conditional on blanket support for his actions. That is not a temporary diplomatic spat. That is a structural shift in how the world's most consequential military alliance understands itself. Europe will spend more on its own defense. It will pursue greater strategic autonomy. It will hedge its dependence on Washington. And Washington, depending on the next election, may or may not reverse course. Here is the framing that I believe serious viewers need to hold on to. We are living through a compressed moment of historical acceleration. In a single day, we have witnessed the first sitting American president enter the Supreme Court chambers to watch arguments over his own executive order, a ceasefire announcement that one side denies making, and the open questioning of a 76-year-old alliance that has underpinned Western security since World War II. None of these are isolated events. They are all expressions of the same underlying dynamic, an American president who is using every instrument of power, judicial, military, and diplomatic, to remake the order he inherited. Whether that remake produces a safer, stronger America, or a more isolated one, is the defining question of this era. And the answer will not come from a single speech or court decision. It will emerge slowly in the years ahead, as the world adjusts to what the United States is becoming. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, but today, the political, economic, and constitutional cracks running through American democracy and the Western alliance are far wider and far harder to close. One court may rule on who is born American, but no court can rule on what America chooses to become. I'm Julian Thorne. This is Tomorrow Updates. We'll see you next time.